So I think the timing is just nice. It's just nice that I will start with the first talk session. So the first talk session, I just want to introduce what is new in Keras Core. Okay, so probably most of you already have used Keras. I'm sure that people who study deep learning, the first thing that they learn is learn Keras. Okay, because it's the easiest framework to actually start with deep learning. Yeah, whether you start with TensorFlow or now you can, if you're doing PyTorch, you also can use Keras. Okay, so the slides is available here if you, in case you want to follow along. So the slide also will be sent out later after the event. But if you want to follow along, the slide is available here. Okay. And then if you have any questions, you also can ask in Slido. I'm sure that we have so many amazing speakers here. If some of the questions that I cannot answer, we can help out. Of course, my talk is a bit overview. Some other speakers will actually go in depth more into the Keras, especially Keras Core. Okay, so maybe I just do a brief introduction of myself. So my name is Kuan Hoong, Ph.D. I'm currently working as a senior manager data science in BAT. I'm one of the Google developer expert, GDE learning. So actually, I'm very passionate about running communities in Malaysia. So I actually founded and run 2 communities in Malaysia. So I founded the TensorFlow Deep Learning Malaysia user group. And then I also founded the Malaysia R user group. So as we know that if you're doing data science, there's 2 commonly used programming language. One is Python, one is R. So R at the time when Malaysia started data science, the initiative in Malaysia, so the Malaysia Digital Economy Corporation or MDEC started with R course. So I actually started the user group to connect the R courses that actually were organized at that time. It was around, I think, 2015. So that time there was a lot of going on. I actually started the communities there. At the same time, recently I also do podcasts. So I have a podcast which is titled AI ML Data Talk Podcast. So the podcast actually, I invite practitioners in the industry, whether the data scientists or machine learning engineer or AI engineer. So I actually talk to them, like what do they do in the work, what are the challenges, what kind of project they do, and then if they're doing any recruitment, so when they want to hire, what do they look out for when they want to hire someone. So in the podcast, we actually talk about that. Podcast is available via Spotify for free. You can just listen to it if you're interested. Okay, so the talk is this is the agenda for the talk. So basically, I'll go. I assume just now when Amrita asked who have used Keras, there are people who have not raised their hand. So probably it's also good for me, the first speaker, to give you some brief introduction what is Keras and why do we use Keras. Then getting started with Keras, and then I'll talk about the latest introduction to Keras Core. So there was some update in Keras Core. So I'll talk about what is new in Keras Core, and then what are the cross framework component. And then I will talk about how to get started, how to configure the backend, backward compatibility, and I will end the talk. So like I said, because I'm the first speaker, I have the chance to tell you an overview, and then the rest of the speaker will give you more in depth, and then they will also talk about some of the application of the Keras. Okay. So maybe just start with what is Keras. So Keras, I know in Malay it sounds like heart, but Keras is actually mean horn in Greek. So it's actually reference to the ancient Greek and Latin literature. So Keras started as an open source library providing a Python interface. It started about 2018. So up version 2.3, Keras actually supported multiple backend. So as we know, around 2015, 2016, that time there's a few deep learning framework just started. Okay, which is like TensorFlow. Then they also have Microsoft Cognitive Toolkit, Piano, and Plate ML, whatever. Okay, but eventually those other frameworks didn't succeed and didn't gain popularity. So starting from version 2.4, Keras only support TensorFlow. Okay, so the creator of Keras is François Hollet. He's a French guy, so the name a bit hard to pronounce. But currently, he's actually working as a senior AI researcher in Google. Okay, so he created Keras, and now he's a main contributor to the Keras, to the TensorFlow framework. I'm sure when you started deep learning, you probably have gone through this book, Deep Learning with Python. Okay, so it's actually written by him. He actually used Keras to explain the concept for deep learning. Okay, so like I said, one of the main reference if you started with Keras will be this book, Deep Learning with Python. So inside this book is actually give you explain from the beginning what is fundamental of deep learning, what is deep learning, or he explains what is neural network, how to get started with neural network. Then he actually go into talk about how to apply all this practice. Okay, so and he break it down to a few area. Okay, of course the most common area that people use deep learning is computer vision. Okay, so a lot of people dealing a lot of research related to computer vision. So in the book, he actually explained that how to use Keras, okay, to do computer vision related stuff. The next thing that people are very interested in is related to NLP. So he talks about how to apply all this in deep learning in text and sequences. Okay, then he also talked about some of the advances in deep learning. And the recent version of this book, he talked about generative AI also. Okay, so if you're interested, if you've never seen this book before, I highly recommend you to go and look at this book, and then you can actually get a very good reference about how to apply Keras. Okay, so why do we need to learn Keras? Why Keras? Okay, so first of all, like one of the quiz just now, what Amrita has mentioned is Keras is written for human. So it's actually very simple to use and very user friendly. Okay, so and then it's very flexible, it's adaptable. Okay, like I will explain later that with Keras Core now, it can actually run in multiple backends, and it's simple at one point. It's also very powerful. So it's not just simple to do simple things. It's simple and user friendly, but you can actually use it to build complicated and powerful applications. Okay, so it actually blends simplicity, and it actually is a very good starting point for people to start to jump right into doing deep learning. Okay, but it's not just simple, but it's also very powerful. Okay, so currently this deep learning, this Keras is one of the most commonly used framework for machine learning. So around the world is about 2.5 million users around out there. Okay, so what's differentiate Keras from the rest? So Keras actually prioritize the developer experience. You actually adopt the best practices, okay, to reduce your cognitive load, and you actually offer a very consistent and simple API. Okay, so with Keras, you can actually turn whatever model that you have into your production, into your products, and easily deploy across multiple platforms. Okay, another thing that we know that when you do deep learning, you actually require a lot of computational power. Okay, so you actually have a strong support for multiple GPU, and it also allow you to do distributed training support. Okay, recently Keras also have released a what we call sub framework where it concentrates in the focus in certain area. For example, we have Keras NLP, we have Keras CV, then we also have Keras to actually allow you to actually fine tune all the parameters in your deep learning framework. So you can see in 2022, one of most used library, of course, the most commonly library that people use in machine learning is scikit-learn. After scikit-learn is actually Keras. Okay, so that is the statistics has been shown out there. So basically, you get started to doing any machine learning or deep learning project. Okay, so you probably this is a common flow, isn't it? And you want to start yourself with any deep learning or machine learning framework. So basically, you have to load your data. Then you have to define your machine learning model. Then you have to compile your model, train your model, evaluate your model, and then do prediction. Okay, so with Keras, every single step, okay, it has this library to allow you to do all these things. Okay, you can actually define what model that you want to use. You can actually compile your model, define all your loss, define all your optimization. Okay, then you can actually train your model. You can actually evaluate your model, and actually, at last, you can do a prediction. So, before I go further, like I said, let me give you a very high overview what is neural network. So neural network is a machine learning model that is inspired by the human brain. Okay, so in every single deep learning neural network, okay, we have interconnected node, or we call neuron, and it actually can be organized into layers. So normally we have the input layers, then we have the hidden layers, then we have output layers. Okay, so the input layer is where you actually import all your data. Then the output layer is where you do all your prediction or forecasting or output. Okay, so the output of layers, okay, is the final layer normally in any prediction of a neural network. So generally, when you train a model, okay, you actually, okay, so this is the input layer, then this is your prediction layer. So you do any model training, okay? So at the first round, when you do any model training, you probably, the result of the prediction will not be accurate, okay? So you will probably need to actually calculate the difference of the prediction compared to the actual value. So there's a loss being calculated, okay? So in neural network, you have a process where your model being trained from left to right, which is what we call the forward propagation. Then when you have the loss being calculated, okay, you need to go back and fix all the weight in your neural network to actually minimize the loss. Okay, so the process where you go back and fix all the weight in your hidden layers is what we call the backward propagation. So it sounds very complicated here. Actually, in your Keras model, you can actually do all this with a few lines of code. So the learning process is basically the iterative process where you do the calculation and backward to make sure in the neural network where until the loss function is minimized. Okay, so how do you get started with Keras? Okay, so there's two ways to get started with Keras. One is using the functional API. Okay, so the functional API is where you can actually create your model in a very flexible way. Okay, there's another way that you can actually start with the Keras is using with the sequential API. Okay, so the function API will handle all your model, the topology, the layers, the input, the multiple input output. Okay, for example, let's say I have a network, okay, designed like this. So I have the input layers, I have the what we call the dense layers in the hidden network, and then we have the output. Okay, so it can be actually referred to something like this. Okay, so in the functional API, to create this network, this is a few lines of code that you can actually use. Okay, the few lines of code that you can actually use. For example, I define the input layers, I define the dense layers, then I define the model that I want to use, I compile the model, then I can actually fit the model. Okay, so when I do the model summary, okay, he will list out, okay, what are the model topology that I have defined. Okay, so that's one way that you can actually start with Keras. The another way that actually you can start with getting started with Keras is the sequential model. Okay, the sequential model basically is where you stack the layers in your network. Okay, you can actually stack the layers in the network. For example, here this is the sequential model. The code will look something like this. Okay, you just define I want to use sequential. Then I stack the layers. Okay, I have the first dense layer, the second dense layer, the third dense layers. Okay, then I can change. So this is how a sequential model will look like. Compared to the functional API, you actually define the layers like this. Okay, so it looks like the sequential model much more simpler to use, okay, compared to the functional API. Okay, so the sequential model, of course, because it looks so much simpler, it has its own limitation. Okay, first of all, you cannot use a sequential model when you have multiple input and output. Okay, and then whenever your layers has multiple output, you also cannot use the sequential model. Okay, if you need to do any layer sharing, you also cannot use a sequential model. And if you want to use a non-linear topology, then you cannot use the sequential model. So there's a lot of limitation. But most of us, when we want to get started, we can just a simple neural network is just a simple stacking of the layers. Then sequential model is a great way to start getting yourself started. Okay, so like I said, starting from version 2.4, Keras has a fully supported TensorFlow. Okay, so Keras now, okay, is a high-level API in the TensorFlow platform. Okay, so it provides a highly approachable and highly productive interface, allow you to focus on the deep learning using TensorFlow backend. So with TensorFlow and Keras, you can access to the scalability and the cross-platform capability of TensorFlow. Okay, so that is Keras. Okay, and recently, about a few weeks ago, there's a big excitement in the Keras community because there is an update in the Keras Core. Okay, there is something that updated in the Keras Core. Okay, so what is new in the Keras Core? Okay, so as we know that starting from version 2.4, Keras only supported TensorFlow. Okay, previously it supported other backend like Tiano and other backend, but up to version 2.4, it was supporting only TensorFlow. But with the new Keras Core, multi-backend Keras is back. Okay, now you can actually get backend support not just with TensorFlow, you can get PyTorch and Jack support. Okay. So this Keras Core now has fully rewritten. Okay, from 135,000 lines of code, now we have reduced it and make it more compact into 45,000 lines of code. Okay, it's fully rewritten. Now it has multi-backend support. It supports now TensorFlow, JAX, PyTorch, and NumPy backend. Okay, so NumPy backend is the inference only use that support. All you need to do, if you have written your code last time using tf.keras, you just have to change the backend. Okay, and by changing the import, you can actually run a different backend. Okay, so you can just use import Keras Core as Keras, okay, and code can now run, okay, in different backend. Okay, for example, you can actually run backend in TensorFlow, or you can choose PyTorch, or you can run JAX backend. Okay, so with keras.ops, okay, with keras.ops, you have a cross framework component, okay, that has been developed. So this Keras opt, you actually include now with the NumPy API. With exactly, you can actually use the same function argument. Okay, as we know that NumPy is one of the commonly used framework out there. So you can actually use, for example, if you want to do matrix multiplication, or you want to do sum, or to do stacks. Okay, so you can just use this inside your this Keras ops. Okay, of course, you also can have other neural network specific function from NumPy, like softmax, binary, cross entropy, or convolution, this ops.conf, you actually can use it also. Okay, so all your models, your layers, losses, metrics, now can be written with the Keras API, work with the same with any other framework. Okay, so you can actually use this outside the Keras workflow also. So you can actually you can develop your own component that works with any other framework using keras.ops, okay, which is running on this NumPy API. So you can see this is a function where you can actually use it, okay. So you have the Keras Core, then you have your, I need to stand here so I don't be outside of the camera, forgot, okay. Okay, so you can actually see now you have a function now is actually running on all these NumPy API. You can actually later change it according to the framework that you have. Okay, for example, here we are running on this. So you can see you're using optics of arrange, which is NumPy optics. Okay, so you can actually see here is opt square. So if you want to change, for example, to PyTorch or JAX or TensorFlow, you just have to change this to here. So this is torch, is torch arrange. Okay, here is torch square. So if it's in JAX, it's numpy.arrange, numpy.tick. Okay, if it's TensorFlow, will be tf, okay, tf.range. Okay, and then so you can see basically the core of the code is about the same, but because you change to other backend, you just have to change this according to the respective backend. So now you have a seamless integration with the backend native workflow. Okay, basically you can write low-level JAX training loop to train your Keras model. You can use like all these optimizer, JAX grad. As we know, different framework has a different way of calculate the gradient. So you have JAX. This is how we calculate the gradient. Then you have TensorFlow gradient tape. Okay. Then you have your PyTorch. Okay, the torch.optimizer. Okay, so basically you can actually have a very seamless integration with multi backend native workflow. Okay, whether it's JAX or TensorFlow or PyTorch. Okay, at the same time, Keras layer module is similar to the torch module. Okay, so now, okay, if you have written your Keras layer, okay, and then you export into a Keras model, you can actually use the same torch module. Okay, so Python can actually start leveraging on the Keras model, okay, whether or not they use the Keras API. And then the Keras model, okay, can be treated as any other PyTorch module. Okay, so you can actually write custom loop also for Keras model. Okay, so this is a Keras model that's written in the torch. And then this is the one is written in the TensorFlow. As you can see, of course, the way the gradient is defined, the optimizer is defined a bit different, but the core of the code is about the same. Okay, the core of the code is about the same. Okay, so you can see that Torch or TensorFlow or JAX, okay, you can actually write your custom loop, okay, for your Keras model. Okay, so with Keras Core, you can have a progressive disclosure of complexity. That means now you can start very simple, okay? Then you can slowly build in your, add in more complexity into your model, into your code, okay? Then you can actually open up more capability that you can actually use. So basically, for example, you can just use the normal fit function to train your model. Then you can actually write, you can actually start writing your custom callback or training step or custom training loop. Okay, or you can actually start with a very simple sequential layers. Okay, then maybe you can use the functional API to to build more function into your network. Then maybe you can actually write your own custom layers, or maybe you can actually write your own subclass model. Okay, so like I said, Keras has a very simple and user friendly framework, but it's not just simple. It allows people to get started, and you can actually build a very complicated product with it. So it's suitable for students who want to start learning, and also suitable for people who are practitioners in the industry, okay, like any AI engineer. Okay, so you can actually see that you can actually write the custom model. You can actually fit your custom model. So you can see this is written in Torch. This is written in TensorFlow. Okay, and then now Keras Core also included some Keras application. Okay, for example, now we have Keras CV and Keras NLP. They actually work outside of the box with Keras Core. Okay, and it supports a lot of pre-trained model that is available out there. Okay, for example, if you are doing any object detection or tracking, okay, you can use the pre-trained model of Jolo version 8. Then if you are doing speech recognition, you can use Whisper. Or you're doing any NLP stuff, you can use BERT or OPT for any large language model. So there are other speakers later will talk about some of this Keras CV or Keras NLP. Okay, so why do we want to learn Keras Core? Why do we want to get excited about Keras Core? Of course, with Keras Core now, you can actually fully maximize your performance of your model, depending on which backend you want to choose. Okay, you might ask yourself, why do I want to choose different backend? Okay, because certain model it perform better at certain backend. Okay, so if you look at it, you can look at it. You can say that maybe PyTorch certain model perform not as good as TensorFlow. A certain model in TensorFlow will not perform as good as JAX. Okay, so certain backend allow you to have a jump in 10 to 20% of performance improvement. The next thing is with Keras Core, you also can maximize your available ecosystem. Okay, for example, you can save your model now to TF save model. Then you can use others. For example, you can actually export it to TF Lite or TF.js. Then you can actually serve your model using TF serving or other TensorFlow libraries out there. The same thing that now with the Keras Core, you can instantiate your model, okay, and then export as a Keras model. Then you can actually fully utilize the PyTorch module, okay, and then use it in the PyTorch ecosystem. You also can use a model as a stateless JAX function, okay, and then use all the JAX transformation that you want to use. Okay. The third thing is PyTorch or TensorFlow or Keras. These are all the open source software available out there. So by using PyTorch or TensorFlow, you actually basically utilizing 40 to 60% of the open source market out there. Okay, and with Keras model, okay, you can actually use by anyone where you do not need to log into any framework. And lastly, you can actually use all the data source availability. Okay, for example, if you're using TensorFlow, you can use tf.data. If you're using PyTorch, you can use PyTorch data loader, or you can use NumPy or Pandas, okay, with any backend. So with Keras, basically, if you have gone through the history where Keras has started, so Keras started in 2015. So at that time, it support a few multiple backend. Okay, so that time you started with Tiano, you can use Keras. Okay, but then later in version 2.4, Keras only support TensorFlow. So that time, if you are using TensorFlow, you can actually just migrate from TensorFlow version 1 to TensorFlow version 2. Okay, and you can still use Keras. And now in 2023, if you have been using TensorFlow version 2, okay, you can now use Keras Core and get started yourself with JAX or PyTorch, okay, with the same Keras code. Okay, and moving forward, maybe if there's other framework coming, probably Keras will be supported also. So as you can see that the framework is transient, but Keras has been all the way that has been supporting all this, especially with Keras Core, with the multiple backend support. So how to get started? Okay, so like I said, with Keras Core, you just have to install the Keras Core, pip install Keras Core. Then you can just import this Keras Core into your Python. Import Keras Core as Keras. Okay. So at this moment, if you use Keras Core, if you Keras Core now, you still need one backend to be supported. So the backend supported now is you have to install TensorFlow. Of course, in the future, you can just define whichever backend that you need. Okay. So the dependency will remove. Then you just need to define whichever backend specific backend framework that you want to use. Okay, so to configure the Keras Core backend, you just have to export the environment. Okay, for example, if I want the Keras backend to be JAX, so I just export the Keras backend JAX, then I can just use backend JAX as my backend. Okay, so you can actually just define the backend that you want to use when you run the Keras Core. If you're using Keras CV and Keras NLP with Keras Core, has its version of 0.60. So Keras CV and Keras NLP also support multiple backend right out of the box. Okay, so you can actually configure a library to run this multiple backend support using this Keras_backend environment. Okay, then from there you can actually configure the backend file. Okay, so for example, let's say I want to get started with Keras CV and then I want to use the pre-trained library YOLO 8, YOLO version 8, and you can see this is the few line of code that straight away I can actually call the model and actually do the prediction. So Keras CV also the same. Okay, sorry, Keras NLP the same. So for here, I'm calling the GPT-2 causal LLM. Okay, then I can actually generate the text using this prompt. My trip to Yosemite was. Okay. So how about if I want to reset the backend? Okay. So Keras CV and Keras NLP will use the tf.keras as the default backend. If you want to restore the default backend, you can just use the command unset Keras backend to make sure, if you want to make sure multi-backend false, then you can just unset it. Okay, so backward compatibility is actually the main concern. So with Keras Core, it's actually intended to make sure you replace this tf.keras. Okay, so if you have your code written using tf.keras, now you can just replace it, the Keras tf.keras code, by importing the Keras code, Keras Core, and then you can actually define whichever backend that you want. Okay, of course you can actually save your model, to the up-to-date Keras format, then you are done. So as a conclusion, with Keras Core now you can use whichever framework that you want. You can enjoy the speed and scalability. If you think that JAX can actually improve your performance, you can enjoy the backend of JAX that can improve your performance. Then if you want to fully utilize the production tools that are available in TensorFlow, you can do that. So with Keras Core now, it's a universal adapter for machine learning framework. So I think I have given a very high overview and brief introduction about Keras and Keras Core. So that's the end of the presentation. Thank you. Is there any question in Slido? Let me. Okay. So no question. Maybe I can open up to the floor for questions. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. No. Yeah. He will talk about it. Don't worry. Give us some hands on if you got time. Any other questions? So if you look at the schedule, there are some very specific topics that the speakers will talk about. So hold on to your questions when during that session. The speaker will talk more about the application of those relevant topics. Okay, then I will try to give away 2 slides for the people who ask questions. Any questions? Yes. Support for C++. Long time I never heard C++ already. I think, what do you mean by support actually? You want to write? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, come back to your question, unless you want to do a very customized thing. If not, then why you want to do C++? Oh, okay. Yes, any questions?
Hi, I just want to ask, because every time we change the framework, the versions of the framework, usually we having the difficulties on. So how about the Keras Core? Is it difficult to when you change?
What's that configuration?
It's not matched with the TensorFlow version. Usually we having I'm having the difficulties when we change the TensorFlow versions and some others library. So is it Keras Core also difficult when we want to?
I think third-party library, for sure there's some problem there. But I think by talking about TensorFlow itself, it should be no problem.
Thank you.
Okay, I have one last one. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, compatibility is also right. How about the
Yeah, so as I mentioned now, Jax is actually quite fast. So of course, Jax is a totally different things you probably need to aware about. But I think John Q is going to talk about Jax later, so you can actually get more about Jax. But yeah, so depend on the if you are already running on TensorFlow and then you think that maybe your model can actually run better in PyTorch, then maybe you want to change your backend to PyTorch because maybe you have using, for example, you have used a lot of your model use a lot of maybe NumPy, where seems to be working better in PyTorch. Then maybe you can consider that. Sam, maybe you can add something. Yeah, I mean performance. Yeah, he will talk about that. Okay, if there's no question, maybe I will end the session and then I will allow the people to go down to level 20th. Okay.